Lady Jane Adebayo was a giant in Nigeria, a woman whose name meant luxury and success. She built Bruxton hotels from a single building into an empire that stretched across 5 countries. She was known for her brilliant mind, her hard work, and her great wealth. But Jane never cared about marrying someone rich or famous. She was looking for true love. She found it in Morris. Morris was handsome, kind, and came from a very humble family. He worked as a history teacher and lived a simple life. Jane loved his sincerity and the gentle way he spoke. Their wedding was the talk of the town, a fairy tale where the powerful queen chose a common man for his heart, not his gold. Jane wanted Morris to feel like an equal, not like a man she kept. She quickly made him the director of the Bruxton Hotel's expansion division. This was a very important and high-paying job. Jane spent months teaching him everything: how to manage budgets, how to talk to government officials, and how to spot a good deal. Morris learned fast. He wore the expensive suits well and quickly got used to the life of luxury. They had private planes, huge houses, and all the servants they could ever need. For a long time, they were the most admired couple in the country. But the vast wealth did something terrible to Morris. The money and power were like a poison that slowly changed him. The simple, humble man disappeared, replaced by someone hungry and greedy. Morris started to see the money not as something he shared with Jane, but as something he should own completely. He felt annoyed when people called him Mr. Jane, or said he owed everything to his wife. He began to resent Jane, the woman who had lifted him out of poverty. He felt trapped by her success. This resentment grew until he needed someone to complain to, someone who understood his new, spoiled view of the world. That person was Lucy. Lucy had been Jane's best friend since their university days. Lucy was beautiful and clever, but she had always lived in Jane's shadow. She was Jane's constant companion, and Morris saw her as a sympathetic ear. When he complained about Jane being too busy or too perfect, Lucy would nod and sigh, secretly fueled by her own deep envy of Jane's position. The affair started quietly, with secret dinners and late-night phone calls that quickly became dangerous and passionate meetings. Morris and Lucy realized they wanted the exact same thing: the Bruxton Empire, Jane's fortune, and the freedom to rule it together. Their conversations moved from gossip and flirtation to cold, calculated planning. "It's too much wealth to share," Morris whispered to Lucy one night in a hotel room that was, ironically, owned by Bruxton. "If she is gone, it is all mine. And then it is ours." Lucy, whose face was usually sweet, held a look of icy determination. "It has to look like a terrible accident, or maybe a rival company trying to take her out. No one can ever suspect us." They studied Jane's routine. Jane had one habit that was perfect for their plan. Every second Friday, she drove herself at night, without her usual security detail, to visit a small, old-fashioned mentor in a quiet town far outside the city. She would then stop for an hour to shop secretly for antiques she loved. The Forest Road section of the highway was the perfect place. It was dark, covered by dense trees, and had no security cameras for miles. They decided on a car bomb, set with a timer. Lucy, using her access as the best friend, managed to hire a dark contact to procure and place the device. The bomb was small, compact, and designed to cause maximum damage. The timing had to be precise. They calculated that Jane would reach the darkest stretch of the forest road at exactly 11 p.m. That was the moment the timer would detonate. The chosen Friday arrived. It was a hot, heavy night, without a moon in the sky. Morris pretended he had an urgent business trip and was on a video conference overseas. He watched from his office window as Jane's black, armored Mercedes sedan, a car Jane had insisted on for her safety, a detail that now chilled him, drove smoothly down the long driveway and onto the main road. The timer was already ticking inside the chassis, placed by Lucy just hours before. Jane, unaware of the death planned for her, was relaxed. She was humming a song and thinking about the antique store she was visiting. She reached the highway and settled in for the long, dark drive. But fate, sometimes, sends a tiny, unexpected hero. Miles behind Jane, driving a dark blue utility vehicle, was a man named Adekunle. Adekunle was not a superhero. He was a private security contractor, a former soldier, and he was heading home after a grueling 12-hour shift. His military training had given him an almost perfect ability to notice small things that others missed. Adekunle was speeding along the highway, thinking about getting home, when he saw Jane's black Mercedes ahead of him. He noticed it was driving slightly slower than usual. As Jane slowed down even more, just for a second, to adjust the air conditioning in the car, Adekunle's headlights caught a flash of unnatural light under the car. It wasn't a normal reflection. It was a quick, faint spark, like a faulty connection or a wire rubbing against metal. Adekunle's soldier's instinct screamed danger. He didn't know what it was, but he knew expensive, important cars don't spark. He floored the gas pedal and sped toward the Mercedes, flashing his lights violently, leaning on his horn, trying to signal the driver to stop. He drove aggressively, moving close to her bumper, forcing a reaction. Jane was furious. She was Lady Jane Adebayo, and no one dared to drive like that around her. She slammed on her brakes, pulling the armored sedan roughly to the side of the road, just before the long, dense stretch of forest began. She got out of the car, ready to shout at the reckless driver. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled, her powerful voice already forming on her lips, but the words were never finished. Just as she stood clear of the driver's door, standing on the edge of the asphalt and looking toward Adekunle, the world dissolved. Boom! The sound was massive, a brutal, physical force that punched the air and shook the very earth. The Mercedes exploded in a blinding flash of white and orange flame, instantly turning into a fiery, twisted wreckage. The force of the blast picked up Jane and Adekunle like dolls and flung them several meters into the thick, protective bushes by the roadside. The intense, instant heat of the blast and the burning fuel was terrifying. Jane lay stunned, her body already screaming from the severe burns she received even from that distance. Adekunle, the hero of the hour, shook off the daze. He was bleeding from cuts, but his mind was clear. He crawled to Jane, pulling her further from the searing heat of the inferno that had been her car. He knew this woman was important, and he called his private network, a loyal, discreet hospital he trusted, and waited, shielding Jane with his own body until help arrived. The news of the explosion dominated every television channel and newspaper headline the next morning. Lady Jane Adebayo, dead in a horrific car explosion. Morris and Lucy played their parts flawlessly. Morris gave interviews, weeping dramatically for the cameras, saying he was heartbroken and that it must have been a senseless attack by a business rival. He was a master of performance. The forensic team, secretly paid off by Morris, delivered their official verdict. The explosion was so severe, the body of the victim was completely incinerated, reduced to dust and scattered fragments. The coffin buried a week later was empty, filled only with rocks and metal scraps, symbolizing a loss so total that nothing was left. Jane's family, her strong, business-savvy mother, Mrs. F.A., and her sister, Melissa, a globally recognized supermodel, were devastated. They had lost the center of their world, the pillar of their financial and emotional support. But the grief was quickly mixed with suspicion and rage. Morris didn't mourn for long. Within weeks, acting as the sole, legitimate heir, he launched a ruthless corporate takeover. He cut off every member of Jane's family. He fired her cousins and nephews who held legitimate, high-ranking positions at Bruxton. He sold off properties Jane had gifted to her grandmother and changed all the executive locks. He replaced Jane's family and loyal staff with his own greedy, incompetent friends and, worst of all, Lucy's associates. He wanted to wipe out every trace of Jane's influence and establish his and Lucy's dominance. Mrs. F.A. and Melissa were left shocked, heartbroken, and completely cut off. They watched as Morris and Lucy flaunted their power, convinced in their hearts that the explosion had been no accident, but lacking a single piece of evidence to prove that the humble man Jane had chosen for love was actually a cold-blooded murderer. Morris had taken everything, and for now, he had won. Miles away, in a secret, guarded hospital wing, the woman they thought was dust lay unconscious, her bandaged body fighting to live. The fire had taken her face, but not her spirit. The true Lady Jane was preparing for a reckoning. For 6 long, silent months, Lady Jane Adebayo was lost in a coma. Her world was a blurry mix of pain and unconsciousness. Her body was wrapped entirely in bandages, her survival a testament to the quick thinking of Adekunle, the kind stranger, and the tireless work of the best medical team money could buy. On a Tuesday afternoon, after months of stillness, Jane's eyes finally snapped open. She saw the white ceiling, the quiet room, and the drip of the IV pole. She was alive. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but beneath it, her mind was crystal clear. She remembered the whole scene. The angry driver, stopping the car, the flash, the noise, the terrible, searing heat. She remembered Morris's last phone call, full of fake concern. She tried to speak, but her throat was damaged, capable only of a dry, scratchy whisper. Her hands, stiff and bandaged, struggled to move. She looked down at her unrecognizable body, covered in layers of medical dressings. The reflection she saw in the polished metal of the IV stand was a distorted monster. But inside, the brilliant mind of Lady Jane was perfectly intact, and it was focused on one thing: who had done this to her? She managed to signal to the head nurse. With painful effort, she whispered, "My mother. Mrs. F.A. Phone number." When Mrs. F.A. and Melissa, her sister, arrived, the scene was agonizing. Mrs. F.A., usually so strong, saw the burns, the tubes, the fragility of her daughter, and she wept openly. Melissa, who was used to the cameras and bright lights, held her mother, her face white with shock. Jane could not hug them, but her eyes, bright and clear amidst the scarred skin, told them everything. It was then that the truth of Morris's malice was fully revealed. He took everything, Jane, Mrs. F.A. choked out, gripping her daughter's hand gently. He fired every one of us from Bruxton. Your cousin, Kazim, who managed the entire Asian portfolio, is out. He is living in a small flat now. Your grandmother's estate, sold. He changed all the accounts and declared himself the sole director. Melissa added, her voice sharp with anger, and the worst. He is already engaged to Lucy, your best friend. They are hosting a huge party next week to celebrate his total takeover and their future marriage. They are dancing on your supposed grave. The news was a physical blow. Jane lay there, unable to move, but her heart was breaking into tiny pieces. A man she had chosen from nothing, lifted to the heights of power, was now systematically destroying her family and betraying her with the person she trusted most in the world. The fire of the explosion was nothing compared to the cold fury that ignited in her heart. Mrs. F.A. told her what the rumors were. The whispers are that Morris and Lucy planned it. They say it was too perfect an attack. But Jane, the police are useless. We have no proof. We have nothing to fight him with. Jane looked into her mother's eyes and gave them a clear, silent command. Morris must not know I am alive. This was the beginning of her new life, a life dedicated to revenge, to proving the truth, and to taking back her empire. The next year was a blur of painful rehabilitation and endless reconstructive surgeries. Jane's wealth, channeled through loyal, secret accounts, paid for the world's best specialists. She had to learn to move again, to speak without pain, and to face her new reflection. The surgeons worked wonders. They couldn't give her back her old face, but they created a new one, strong, beautiful, but with subtle differences that made her unrecognizable to a casual acquaintance. She was a masterpiece of medical science. When she was finally well enough, she moved into her mother's hidden mansion, away from the prying eyes of Lagos society. The moment she was released, she started her war. She hired 2 teams, an international team of forensic analysts and a team of former federal detectives, known for their absolute loyalty and discretion. They were given one single, unlimited objective: find the proof. Jane poured every ounce of her strategic mind into the investigation. She directed them to re-examine the bomb site, not for a body, but for fragments of the device. She instructed them to trace every suspicious payment Morris made in the months leading up to the explosion, looking for payments disguised as consulting fees. She wanted Lucy's digital footprint analyzed, even if it was just deleted messages from old, encrypted apps. The tension of waiting was unbearable. Every day, Morris and Lucy grew stronger in her company. Finally, after months of work, the lead detective, a quiet, intense man named Jide, brought the evidence. It was all there. Bank transfers matching the cost of the specific military-grade timer device. Recovered messages between Morris and Lucy discussing the package delivery and the perfect timing at 11 p.m. and a tiny, melted piece of the bomb's circuit board found deep in the roots of a tree at the explosion site. The proof was irrefutable. Jane read the report, page after page, her new face impassive, until she reached the final, cold conclusion that stated, without doubt, the involvement of Morris and Lucy. The pain of betrayal finally overwhelmed the fire of her resolve. She dropped the papers and broke down, weeping uncontrollably, not for the money, but for the loss of love and trust. Melissa, who had been waiting nearby, rushed in and held her sister, embracing her tightly. They are not worth your tears, Jane, Melissa murmured. They gave you the evidence. Now we give them justice. The perfect day for the reckoning was set. Morris and Lucy's lavish engagement party at the Bruxton Hotel's main ballroom. It was a massive celebration, broadcast live on all major Nigerian television channels, a public display of their stolen wealth and power. Jane prepared meticulously. Melissa, using her supermodel status and influence, ensured that her mother and a mysterious guest, Jane, would be on the VIP list, giving them a grand entrance. Jane chose a tailor-made, black silk suit that radiated authority, pairing it with diamond jewelry that Morris thought was still locked in her vault. Her hair was styled perfectly, and her new face, slightly sharper and more intense than her old one, was a mask of cold fury. The ballroom was packed with Lagos high society. Morris, beaming and arrogant, stood by Lucy, who looked triumphant in a glittering dress. Morris raised a glass, ready to toast his future. Suddenly, the massive double doors of the ballroom swung open. Every head turned. Melissa, looking stunning in a flowing gold dress, walked in first, followed by Mrs. F.A., dignified and severe. And then, the final figure. Lady Jane Adebayo walked in, looking every bit the queen she was, only slightly altered, and infinitely more dangerous. The entire room went silent. Champagne flutes dropped. People gasped. Some older guests actually ran toward the exits, thinking they had seen a ghost. The live cameras, broadcasting the whole event, froze on her face. Morris's glass stopped halfway to his lips. His face went from beaming confidence to a sick, gray color. He stammered, unable to form a word. Lucy's reaction was the loudest. Her voice was a scream of pure, panicked terror. No, you were dead. You burned to ashes. Lady Jane walked slowly toward the podium, her sister and mother flanking her like silent, powerful guards. She reached the microphone and looked directly at Morris. Her voice, strong and clear, carried across the stunned room. I didn't burn to ashes, Morris, Jane stated calmly, her eyes never leaving his. I survived the fire you set for me. And now, I am here to reclaim what you tried to steal. She gestured toward the ballroom entrance. The doors opened again, and a full team of uniformed police officers, led by Chief Superintendent Okafor, walked in. Jane held up the thick document containing the evidence. This party is over, she announced to the cameras and the crowd. This document contains irrefutable, legal evidence that Morris and Lucy conspired to murder me 1 year ago for my fortune. She laid the papers on the podium, proof for all to see. You were a history teacher, Morris. I gave you a crown, and you chose to wear a thief's mask. Morris tried to shout, tried to deny it, but his words were incoherent. Lucy, sobbing, attempted to push through the crowd to escape, but she was quickly intercepted. Morris and Lucy were surrounded, formally arrested for attempted murder and fraud, and led away from the shocked, silent ballroom, the entire scene playing out live on national television. Lady Jane stood alone on the podium, reclaiming her empire not with force, but with truth. Her family was restored to her side. The Bruxton Hotel's empire was hers again, purged of the greed that had nearly destroyed it. The story became a national legend, a harsh lesson learned by all of society, that the greatest betrayals often come from the people you trust most. Jane learned that true love requires loyalty, and that forgiveness is only possible when justice is served. She continued to lead Bruxton, stronger and wiser, knowing the fire of betrayal had purified her, leaving behind a woman who would never again mistake humility for honesty.